Last week, the House of Representatives passed the first effort to decriminalize cannabis use. What does that mean to cannabis businesses and, by extension, cannabis investors? Here to discuss with me today, Cannabis Capitalist editor Tom Carroll, and we also welcome Michael King, CEO of King's Garden Inc., a leader in cannabis cultivation. Welcome to you both.
Good
Thank
morning.
you.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Michael, let's start with you. What is in the recently passed MORE Act? And again, just in the House of Representatives, what is it that appeals to you so much, especially for cultivators like yourself?
Well, I think we have to look at the financial structure and how cannabis businesses came around. My background is Wall Street. I graduated from Pace University and began my career in US in the financial markets. And so getting into the cannabis industry, we came out to California about 8 years ago. My partner's been in the business for about 16 years. And so we raised funds from private investors. To date, we raised approximately $55 million, which has all been friends and family. Financial markets were not available to us back then. There were no stories about companies going public, raising hundreds of millions of dollars. It was all, California being a very gray market at the time because it was an outdated law from 1996. It was medical and it was not-for-profit. So we needed to show our investors how we can make money, how we can generate them returns in a not-for-profit medical industry, right? So that the concept doesn't make sense. We were able to do that. It took us, we did it project by project. And it was really, our investors trusting us, believing in us that we will deliver. And so we began in 2016 as King's Garden, 2015 rather, I'm sorry, as King's Garden, raising anywhere between $500,000 up to, $20 million per project basis. And then you started hearing stories about companies going public. However, the only place where they can go public is in Canada. Right. So you heard about MedMen. They went public at $1.5 billion value. We were supposed to go public a few months after that. But having realized the platform which was available to us and knowing the US institutions and how things are really supposed to be done, we decided against it. And so the irony in, the biggest financial market in the world not being able to not have access to cannabis companies was just crazy. So what does it mean to us? It means that finally we can go and sit down with normal US-based banks about possibly listing on US exchanges like NASDAQ, like New York Stock Exchange, and being able to participate in the greatest financial market in the world, which is, of course, in the United States.
If the MORE Act were to pass in the Senate, this would really open a lot of doors to your company.
Absolutely. We're excited. We're closing on $80 million in revenue, about 39% EBITDA. Again, private company, not a single institution has invested in us. Last year, we did about $43 million. 2021, we're looking at about 110. And so we're really excited about the opportunities that this will bring to us. Via possible mergers or acquisitions, or just being able to, if we choose to, list on a US exchange. So to us, this is really exciting because we made a huge decision and we turned down $50 million of value of what they were telling us back then, $650 million to go public. We turned that down in hopes that this will one day happen.
Tom, to you now, what did we see cannabis stocks do when the MORE Act passed on Friday? And what do you think of Michael King's story here? What do you think the horizon is for companies, specifically cultivators? How do they stand to benefit from the MORE Act?
Yeah, so the stocks on Friday, in the midst of all the news about the MORE Act passing the House, were actually somewhat mixed. And it was really mixed because the market expected it. It was news that had been talked about. It was widely expected to pass the House. The Senate is where we're going to have a little more trouble. But that said, I mean, let's think about cannabis stocks this year. I mean, the index I follow is up about 30% year to date. Our portfolio in particular is up about 130% year to date. So it's been, a rising tide lifts all boat kind of environment, but it's still very much a stock picker's market. And, Michael's company, I think, sounds like the numbers are fantastic there. Revenue growth has been great, and an organization like his looks to be really on the tipping point, of some really, really decent revenue growth. And I like to say that these companies are going from, tens of millions in revenue to hundreds of millions, and it's happening right now.
Wow, it's an exciting time to be covering cannabis, I know, for all of us. Tom, I wanted to have you read the cannabis leaves, if you'll forgive the pun, a little bit about what we saw in terms of the votes in the House and what that might portend for the Senate. I wanted to note that especially Representatives Matt Gaetz and Mast voted for it. They're both Republicans. So the Republicans that we saw cross, they do seem to support this thesis that we've earlier heard from the Marijuana Policy Project, which is that representatives and senators that represent constituents that have a high veteran community or have already passed a state legalization program are much more likely to support this when it gets to the Senate. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think in a nutshell, what you're seeing are, regardless of party affiliation, look, if my state has got a big, robust medical cannabis program, at some point, right, I got to cross party lines and I got to start supporting, my folks here at home in my home state. And I think you're just seeing a lot more of that. Now, in terms of, this passing and moving on to the Senate, and our readers know that we view legalization, if you will, as kind of a spectrum, right? It's not going to be binary. It's going to be an incremental pieces along the way that move the ball forward. And certainly the MORE Act passing the House is quite meaningful legislation that will certainly get some time in the Senate. Not right now. I think that we're in the midst of a lot of politicking and political theater still. So 3 to 6 months from now, I think that the conversation might be a little different.
Michael, I want to ask you what the MORE Act means to your ability to compete with the illicit market.
Well, here in California, we've been fighting the black market for forever, right? So when we came to existence as King's Garden, 95% of the market was black market. There's always going to exist a black market in every state, especially in California. However, the state has been able to put in place regulations where previous to 2018, we were bringing our product to the dispensary and sitting next to the guy who just brought his product from illegal grow. And before 2018, we were paying taxes, we were paying workers' comp, we were paying electrical bills, and having to compete on the same price point to the retail market. That illegal guys are not paying any taxes. So we were able to pass those times because of quality of product. So black market will always exist. Luckily today, it is no longer our competitor because California has really tight regulations on track and trace, where's the product coming from, where is it tested, and of course, finally to the consumer. The consumer is getting educated. They want to make sure they're buying product which has been lab tested in legal retail locations. We're not really concerned about the black market that much as far as our competition because it's always going to exist.
Yeah, so you have a lot of thoughts, it sounds like, on some of the other regulatory steps that need to happen once there is a federal decriminalization law passed. What are you doing as a business owner to lobby or to encourage public officials to continue to open up the markets and make it easier for you not only to compete with the black market, but other kinds of health and safety regulations be at play as well?
We have always been very, very close with the cities in which we operate. We're located in the Coachella Valley, specifically Cathedral City and Palm Springs. About 5 years ago, we were very instrumental in showing Cathedral City how they can tax cannabis. Prior to that, it was not legal in the city. And so we sat down with the city officials. We presented our business plan from King's Garden, how they can tax cannabis, specifically cultivation. They then adapted, our business plan to their cannabis ordinance and passed cannabis cultivation. As a result of that, we were able to be one of the first ones, if not the first ones, to launch the first 4 buildings in Cathedral City. In Palm Springs, we're able to acquire the first volatile license for manufacturing. And so our relationship, we have an open door policy. The state of California, all the regulatory bodies know us very well. They have brought people to our facilities as a demonstration to how they should be built, how they should be operated, the SOPs, et cetera. So, our doors are open to everyone. We've had senators here, and we look forward to continuing these relationships, because it's very important for the regulatory bodies to understand what it's like to operate these facilities. A lot of the times they're setting rules and regulations in place without really understanding, the movement of the operation.
And one last question for you, Tom. What is coming down the pike for Cannabis Capitalist? What do you got cooking?
Oh, well, our report actually comes out this week, and we're going to be highlighting a very interesting, mid-cap stock that has a really great amount of potential going forward. Solid management team, very interesting background, and an interesting way that this particular CEO got into the business. So stay tuned for that. Thursday after the close, that report comes out.
All right. And if you would like to see much more content just like this, please find us at all of these social media platforms. You can find us on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm Jessica Stone.